So starting with epidemiology, there were 38,364 suicides in the United States in 2010. But it's hard to really know how big of a number that is without some frame of reference. So, for instance, with lightning, we take great precautions with lightning because we know it can be deadly, right? And so we'll, postpone soccer games, we'll postpone football games due to lightning, and reasonably so. But with this, if you looked at an average for about 10 years of data, there are about 49 deaths due to lightning in the United States every year. Similarly, we take great precautions to prevent fire deaths. We have people have, fire alarms in their house, in every bedroom, and we do fire drills at schools, all good things. And there are about 3,195 fire deaths. Similarly, with drownings, we go to great lengths, and there are about 4,000 drownings. So you can see where I'm going. We take a lot of precautions for many different death or causes of death, even though they're much less common than suicide. Now, I also think it's helpful to have a couple that show the magnitude of suicide, how big this really is, because we don't hear about it much due to the stigma. So, for instance, in 2009, there were 16,799 murders. So there are about twice as many suicides as there are murders in the United States. And lastly, and this is the one that really amazes people, there are more deaths by suicide than automobile accident deaths. So suicide is a really big problem. It's the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, but you don't hear about it much just because there's a stigma about suicide. People don't talk about it, and because of that, people don't think that it's as common as it is. And then in Mississippi, which is where I'm at, suicide is has the 30th highest suicide rate in the United States, with 388 deaths being attributed to suicide in 2010. So one thing that I think is important to talk about are suicide rates in different age groups. Overall, we see that suicide rates are increasing, so that's this bottom line here. Our actual national average, our national rate is increasing over the last several years. And this is actually due to a change that we see with suicide in age. So traditionally, older adults have always had the highest suicide rates. But what we see is that older adult suicide is actually coming down. It's actually the baby boomers that are drastically increasing. And this is in large part what's causing this increase in suicide rates. So all three of these groups are at elevated risk, as you can see. But just looking at the trends, this seems to really be due to the increase in suicide rate among baby boomers. Now, just looking at some age and sex differences, overall there are approximately 25 suicide attempts for every one death. However, this differs widely based upon age. So for younger adults, there are between 100 and 200 suicide attempts for every one death. So younger adult suicide attempts are much less likely to be fatal. However, for older adults, the ratio drops to between 2 and 4 to 1. So a much greater likelihood that a suicide attempt will be fatal for older adults. There are also significant sex differences that are worth mentioning. Specifically, women are 3 times more likely to attempt suicide, but men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide. So why is this? Why are all these, what can we attribute this to? I believe it's a combination of a couple factors, but one of the biggest ones is methods of attempts. So what you'll notice is for women are much less likely to use firearms than men. So that's one piece. But also look at this. For younger individuals are significantly less likely to use firearms than older individuals. So I think a lot of the differences that we saw in the last slide can be attributed to these differences here in methods, suicide attempt methods.